So good morning, everybody. And we're on a new time situation for many people. Here at Sravasti Abbey, we don't change our clocks. And so we are now on mountain time, along with Arizona, New Mexico, and so on. So this is our second to the last talk in this series. We're getting close to the end. And as usual, we will start with some prayers and a little bit of time to generate a positive motivation for participating in this class. So while reciting the prayers, it's good if you can to imagine the Buddha in front of you. Imagine you're in the presence of the Buddha. And you can visualize just one Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, or you can also visualize many Buddhas. There's always lots of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around us all the time, aware of us with compassion, loving kindness, ready to help us in whatever way possible. If it's difficult to visualize, try to at least have the feeling that the Buddha is there. And in the presence of the Buddha, you can feel safe, protected, loved, accepted, cared for, and feel that there is someone who wants to help you, that all is not hopeless. But Buddha understands our minds, our thoughts, our feelings, our needs, and is ready to help us. If we just open our minds, our hearts to him and ask for his help. And it's also good, if you can, to imagine yourself surrounded by other beings. You can imagine all sentient beings if you're comfortable with that. Or just think of as many people and beings as you can, in particular those who are in need of special help right now, people who are suffering physically or mentally or both. Imagine them right there in front of you. Imagine them turning to the Buddha as well, taking refuge in the Buddha, opening their hearts to his wise and compassionate help and guidance. So you can do that imagination, that visualization while we do the prayers. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. The next prayer, the four measurable thoughts, is an enhancement of our concern for others, our altruism, we wish to benefit others. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Mandala offering, we imagine the whole universe, all the beautiful, pleasing, precious things existing everywhere in the universe, and transform it into a pure land, offer it to the Buddha and the holy beings, and wish that all living beings can experience the pure land. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamne Atayami. And now while we recite the mantra of the Buddha, you can visualize, imagine light flowing from the Buddha's heart into yourself and into everyone else, all the other beings around you. The light purifies our suffering and its causes, negative karma and afflictive states of mind, greed, hatred, ignorance, and so on. Imagine these getting purified. And the light also nourishes our positive potential, the positive states of mind we have, such as love and compassion and wisdom, so that they can grow more and more and eventually turn into the qualities of an enlightened being, an enlightened mind. Tayata Om Mani Mani Mahamanaye Soha. 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 Okay, let's sit quietly for a few more minutes. And it's helpful to make the decision that you will keep your mind focused on what we're doing in this class, not let your mind get distracted by other things, other thoughts, or other activities like looking at your phone to see what messages you have and so forth. I really try to put everything else aside so that you can focus on this class, because here we're looking at the teachings of the Buddha, the essential teachings on how to become enlightened, how to transform our own unenlightened situation, our body and mind, our aggregates, into the body and mind of a Buddha, an enlightened being. So these are really precious teachings. And so it's really good to focus on them, not think of other things during this time. And also to do so with an altruistic intention, altruistic motivation, wishing to be of benefit to others. If you're comfortable with the idea of becoming enlightened, becoming a Buddha yourself so that you can help all living beings, you can bring that thought, that motivation into your mind. But if you're not yet sure that that's what you want to do, you're still exploring the teachings and trying to decide if it's what you want or not, you can at least have an altruistic intention, wishing to learn things here that will help you to be more helpful to others. The people in your life, family, friends, people you work with, people you meet. So wanting to bring more positive energy into your interactions with others so that you can be helpful to them and not harmful to them. Okay, so we are on the section of the Lam Rim called the Great Scope. This is the third and last of the three main sections of the Lam Rim. And the Great Scope is all about the Bodhisattva's path, how to cultivate bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha, to help all living beings, and then how to actually do that, how to become a Buddha. What are the practices that we need to do in order to become a Buddha, to benefit all living beings? And so where we left off last time, we're going through the 6 perfections, which are the main practices a bodhisattva does to become enlightened. And we were on the third of the 6 perfections, the perfection of patience. So we sort of got partway through that. So we'll continue from where we left off. And so there's 3 kinds of patience. The first one is this one, the patience of avoiding anger at those who harm you. So this is all about how to manage anger, hatred, aversion, impatience, all those, that family of emotions that we all have at least sometimes, and we do need to learn how to manage our anger. And according to Buddhism, it's possible to gradually decrease anger and eventually get to the point where we don't have it anymore at all, no more anger. But that's hard and it takes time. So in the meantime, while it's still there in our mind, we learn how to manage it. And even in these kind of cases where somebody is harming us, someone is doing things, physical things or verbal things that cause us suffering and problems. So in those kind of situations, it's very difficult not to get angry. And we may even feel justified in being angry. But according to Buddhism, anger is very destructive. It can lead to negative karma. It can lead to committing crimes. It can lead to a great deal of suffering for others. but it also causes suffering to ourselves. And that's really helpful to understand that when we get angry, we are harming ourselves as well as others. It disturbs our mind. We create karma that will bring suffering in the future. And it destroys our happiness and our peace. It's simply not possible to be peaceful and happy while there's anger in our mind. So it's good to look at that. And if we can recognize that, how anger is counterproductive, it doesn't bring happiness, it brings suffering for ourselves, then we'll want to do something about it. We'll want to work on our anger. So there's lots of different methods we can use to work on anger. There's just a few mentioned here. And last week we looked at the first two, contemplating the kindness of others, and serving sentient beings as serving the Buddhas. So if we do have respect for the Buddhas and we think about how they view other beings, even harmful beings, even people who do really destructive, harmful things, but from the point of view of the Buddha, those beings are dear and precious, just like their children. So they love and have compassion for every living being, even the ones who do harmful things. And so if we get angry at and do harmful things back to sentient beings, Buddhas are not happy about that. They're not pleased with us. So they want us to have compassion and patience and kindness towards others. So if we do have those kind of qualities, compassion and kindness and patience towards other beings, then that's something that will please the Buddhas. Buddhas will be happy with us. Okay, let's look at the third one. The third one says, receiving harm is the result of one's own karma, and going through this experience purifies our karma. And so not everyone has confidence in karma. Some people may be skeptical about it, but it's very much a part of Buddhist teachings. And even in non-Buddhist traditions, you know, there's a similar idea. You do harmful things, you do bad things, and bad things are going to happen to you. Notice they don't use the word karma. You know, in the Bible, they say, what you sow, you will reap. You reap what you sow. So what that means is if we have bad things happen to us, that's because of our karma. We must have created harmful actions ourselves in the past. So if somebody's yelling at us, getting angry at us, insulting us, that's probably because we did it ourselves. And we might even be able to remember in this lifetime doing something like that. Yeah. So, but if we can't remember anything like that in this lifetime, then Buddhism says, well, you must have done it in past lives. So in our past lives, we behave that way, created that bad karma, and that is why this other person is behaving that way towards oneself. So that's something to contemplate, and that if you can accept that, that can really cool down your anger, because you realize, wow, you know, I did that myself, and now this is happening to me. So who am I to get angry at somebody else for doing something that I myself have done? And also using this idea of karma, we can use this situation as a lesson in karma. It's like, okay, now I know what it's like to be treated that way. I treated other people that way in the past. And, you know, maybe I had no concern at all for how they felt. But now I'm on the receiving end of that kind of behavior. And now I know what it feels like. This is terrible. I don't want to make other people feel this way. I don't want to do this to other people because it's really painful. And also, I don't want to have this experience again in the future. I don't want to go through this again. And so the way to prevent that is by not creating that karma, not doing the action that brings about this sort of result. And so then we feel a strong determination to really take care of our karma not do bad things, not create bad karma, and create good karma instead. So then it becomes a very powerful lesson in karma. And also the second part of that sentence says, going through the experience purifies our karma. So when we do go through bad experiences, which are the result of our own karma in the past, that means that karmic debt is being paid off. Karma is a little bit like a debt, you borrowed money, now you got to pay it back. So we did something harmful, and now we go through this experience as a result of that. And so it's like now, oh, that karma is finished. I don't have that karma, stuck in my mind anymore. That's a good thing. Phew, I have less karma. My karmic debt has been reduced. So this is what many Tibetans say when they're going through a bad experience. They'll say, oh, this is purifying my bad karma. That's great. So you can feel some happiness when you go through a bad experience. But we have to keep in mind, karma is a natural law, because we sometimes, because of our Western background, God and the 10 Commandments and so on, so we sometimes think that karma is like punishment. Yeah. When bad things happen to us, we are being punished by somebody out there for the bad things we did in the past. So it's not like that. There is nobody out there, no supreme powerful being who's causing us to go through these bad experiences, punishing us. But rather it's a natural law. It's just the natural outcome of our own actions. It's like food. Some food that we eat is good for us, healthy, and it makes us, healthy and strong and feel good. But other things that we might eat might be harmful for us and make us sick, or even die. People die sometimes because of eating poisoned food. So, being healthy or being sick as the result of eating food is not because there's somebody out there who's making us go through these experiences, but it's just the natural outcome of that kind of food when it goes into our body. So in a similar way, karma is just the natural outcome of what is going on in our mind, what kind of thoughts we have, and what kind of actions we do with our body and our speech. So it's just, we are the ones who are creating the causes for those experiences, and no one else is making us go through them. So karma is an important topic. We need to, take time studying it and contemplating it and asking questions to clear up our doubts and so on. But anyway, thinking in terms of karma can be very helpful to avoid getting angry at the person who is harming us. Also, if we get angry and retaliate and harm them back, we're just creating more bad karma, and that means we're going to have more bad experiences in the future. So is that smart? Is that intelligent? Is that what we want? On the other hand, if we can be patient, patience is a virtuous state of mind. It's very, very positive, very virtuous. So if we are able to practice patience in that kind of situation and not get angry and act out our anger. I mean, we might feel angry inside, but if we can do something to cool down our anger and not act it out, that means we're practicing patience, and that's good karma. Then we're creating good karma, creating virtue, and that will bring happiness and peace in the future. Okay, so then next one is generating compassion for the harm doer. So this is very, very helpful if you can do. It's not easy, but if you just try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand what's going on with them. I mean, when people do harmful things, it's usually because they're suffering. They're not happy. Yeah, they're not happy and flourishing, but they're unhappy. There's problems happening in their life. And this is their way of acting out their suffering by harming others. So you can understand that if you just think about your own experiences and the times when you've done harmful things and what was going on in your mind at that time. Were you happy and everything going well in your mind and your heart and your life? Or were you unhappy and experiencing problems? So if we can understand that this person who's doing harmful things is suffering, that can help us to soften our attitude towards them, and even get to the point where instead of being angry at them and wanting to hurt them, wanting to, lash back at them, we'll feel like, oh, I want to help this person. They're really suffering. They're really confused. And that's another thing we can think is, if they are doing harmful things, that means they're creating bad karma. And that's going to bring them even more suffering in the future. Yeah, so they're like on self-destruct mode. They're unhappy, and as an attempt to get out of their unhappiness, they're doing these harmful things, creating bad karma. They're getting themselves more enwrapped in suffering. So it's really, if we think about that, understand that, it really opens our heart to want to help the person. Doesn't mean you will be able to. They may not want you to help them, but just to have compassion for them, that itself is helpful. Because if you can have compassion for that person, that in turn might help them to soften and realize that what they're doing is wrong and that they need help, they need to change, and so on. So meeting harm and anger with kindness and compassion is actually the best way to help somebody change. Meeting them with more anger is just going to increase their anger. It's just going to increase their wish to do harm. So that's not helpful at all. But if you can meet them with kindness and compassion and patience, that doesn't mean, though, that you just stand back and let them do harmful things. That is not the meaning of patience in Buddhism. There's a misunderstanding about that. Some people think patience means being passive and apathetic and just letting everybody do all kinds of harmful things. And you just smile and say, yes, dear. It's not like that. If someone is doing harmful things, we should try to stop them if possible, because they're harming themselves as well as harming others. So we shouldn't enable people to do harmful things. But the point is, what attitude do we have towards them? Are we dealing with them with anger and hatred and wanting them to suffer? That's not right. Ideally, we try to generate compassion and love and the genuine wish to help them. And then with that in our mind, that attitude in our mind, taking steps to stop them from doing harmful things. It's not easy to do, but with time, with practice, it is possible. So there's a huge amount of material on this topic, and we don't have time to go into more, but a recommendation is chapter 6 of Shantideva's text, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And there's several commentaries on that. One book called Healing Anger by the Dalai Lama, published by Snow Lion. And so there he was actually giving teachings on chapter 6. So it's chapter 6 plus the Dalai Lama's commentary. So that's a really good book on anger. Another one is by Thubten Children. It's called Working with Anger, also published by Snow Lion. And that's also basically about chapter 6 of Shantideva, with explanation about that. There's also a book by Pema Children called No Time to Lose, which I think is from Shambhala. And that is her kind of commentary on the whole of Shantideva's text, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So you can find her explanation of chapter 6 in there. Okay, so let's move on. The next patience, the second type of patience, is called the patience of accepting suffering. And so this is something that we practice whenever we find ourselves experiencing difficulties, anywhere from, having an insect like a fly or a mosquito bothering us or maybe trying to bite us, to being sick, hungry, too hot, too cold, losing our job, dealing with a difficult boss, or whatever, any kind of suffering, any kind of problem we experience in our life. So this kind of patience means learning how to deal with this situation without losing heart, becoming discouraged, depressed, frustrated, and so forth. Or another thing people sometimes do is just try to run away from the situation, try to escape by taking drugs, alcohol, eating, zombieing out with entertainment, just saying, I can't deal with this, and, finding some escape route. That doesn't help, because the problem doesn't go away, problem doesn't get dealt with. It's still there when you come down from your drug trip or whatever. So it's not a solution. And also the Buddha, one of the sutras in the Pali canon called the Salata Sutra, he spoke about arrows. He said, when we have a problem like pain or whatever, it's like being shot with one arrow. And then the way we react, the way we respond to that, sometimes we shoot ourselves with another arrow. Yeah. And what he meant was, if we don't have a wise, skillful way of dealing with our problems, sometimes we just make things worse, like shooting ourselves with another arrow, doubling our suffering rather than relieving it. And so we need to learn how to respond wisely and skillfully to problems that happen in our life. So here are some methods that we can use to do this. So the first one, encountering suffering purifies negative karma. So that's like in the previous slide with anger. When someone harms us, this is our own karma. Well, it's similar if bad things happen to us, if we get sick, or if we're bothered by insects or whatever. So this is the result of some negative karma we created in the past. And so this is our karma ripening. And it means then that karma is getting finished. That karmic debt is getting paid off. So thinking in that way can help your mind be more accepting of the situation. It doesn't mean you don't try to find a solution. I mean, if there is a solution, you can get inside of a mosquito net to keep the mosquitoes off of you or whatever. So we can certainly find solutions to our problems. We don't just have to sit there and suffer. But here we're talking more about our mental level, our mental emotional response to the situation. So thinking in terms of karma can help us keep our mind more calm and positive rather than getting really upset and freaked out and so on. The second one, this is one that I really like, really helpful. Contemplate others' suffering and generate empathy and compassion for them. So when we go through some suffering, some difficult experience, that is an ideal opportunity to increase our compassion. We can think, I'm not the only person in the world who has an experience like this. There's many other people. And we can think, people we know or people we've heard about on the news, or just imagining lots of people in the world have this kind of problem. Some people have it even worse than me. There's lots of people who are bothered by mosquitoes, but they don't have mosquito nets, and they don't have repellent that they can put on. And so they're just like at the mercy of all these mosquitoes biting them. And they may even be malaria-ridden mosquitoes, malaria-infested mosquitoes or whatever. They have the chance, they might get malaria. So anyway, you kind of compare your situation with those of other people, and you realize other people suffer like this too. And in some cases, even worse than what I'm going through. So by doing that, you can generate compassion for those other people and beings. And also you see your own situation in perspective, and you realize, oh, it's not really that bad. It could be worse. So then it seems bearable. your own problem, your own experience seems bearable rather than unbearable. So it gives you a lot of courage in addition to compassion. And we do need to cultivate compassion on the path to enlightenment. So this is a great way to cultivate compassion. It's just using our own experiences of difficulty and suffering to understand the suffering of others. The next point says, contemplate that there are other good qualities of suffering. So that sounds kind of strange, but this is actually from one of the verses in Shantideva's text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. One verse, I forget which chapter it's in, but anyway, he's talking about the good qualities of suffering. It's probably in chapter 6. He said, suffering has good qualities, huh? Believe it or not. And one of the good qualities is the one we just looked at, how it's an opportunity to have compassion for sentient beings. But there are other qualities, good qualities he mentions. One is generating renunciation. So when we experience suffering, that's a great reminder of samsara. We're in samsara, and samsara is the nature of suffering. And so we shouldn't be surprised that suffering happens. Bad things happen to us. That's the nature of samsara. And if we don't want to suffer, we have to get ourselves out of samsara. So that's renunciation, the wish to be free of samsara and to attain liberation and enlightenment. So going through difficulties helps us have stronger renunciation. The next point is eliminating pride. So we can become kind of arrogant when things are going well in our life and we're not experiencing too many difficulties. We can feel kind of puffed up and, wow, I'm so great, I'm so fantastic, look at me. And that, isn't a healthy state of mind, because arrogance can cause us to look down on others and feel I am better than them, and even sort of mistreat them, be kind of nasty to them. So it's not a good state of mind. It's actually one of the afflictions we have to overcome in order to reach enlightenment. So when problems happen, difficulties happen, suffering happens, it sort of, puts a pin in our balloon of pride. We get deflated rather than inflated. And so again, it's a kind of reminder that I am not perfect. I am not like the Buddha. I still have a lot of faults and a lot of delusions and a lot of karma and a lot of suffering. I'm still just an ordinary samsaric being that has a long way to go. So it can really help to decrease our pride and our arrogance and induce humility, which is a much better state of mind. And then the last point there is increasing conviction in karma. So again, like before, we could use this unpleasant experience to remember karma and think about how, well, whatever experiences I have are the result of my own actions. If I don't want to suffer, I have to avoid creating bad karma. That's the cause of suffering. And if I want happiness and good experience, I have to create good karma. That's the cause for those. So it helps us to be more convinced and more determined to live our life in accordance with karma. The next point is do tonglen, or taking and giving. We did talk about that earlier. It's one of the points in the method for developing bodhicitta, called equalizing and exchanging self and others. So there we generate this strong feeling of compassion for others and wish to take their suffering away from them and take it onto ourselves. And then we wish them to have happiness. So we imagine giving them our own merit and our good qualities and our resources and our body, whatever it is we have, we imagine giving it to others. And so, yeah, when you experience some suffering, a simple way of doing tonglen practice, and I think we did talk about this, is just to think, yeah, there are other people who suffer too. May this suffering that I'm going through, this difficult experience that I'm going through, may this eliminate the suffering of all other beings. Almost like you can imagine the suffering of all beings coming into and absorbing into your own suffering, your own problem, and then you go through it for their benefit. You experience that suffering so that all other beings can be free from theirs. So it's just something you do on the mental level, making a change in your mind and your attitude. It's very powerful, very, very helpful. And sometimes the problem itself will kind of go away by doing that. Don't expect that. Don't be attached to that, but it can happen. That's been my experience, that the problem kind of disappears by doing that compassionate taking on of the suffering of others. The next point is remembering impermanence. So that's always helpful too, just to remind yourself this problem isn't going to be there forever. Everything is impermanent, including suffering. That's a good sign of impermanence. That suffering is impermanent. And so it will end at some point. Because sometimes our mind, I don't know why this happens, but when something unpleasant is going on, there's a little thing in the mind that says, oh, it's going to be like this forever. It's never going to stop. It's never going to go away. I'm going to have this suffering forever and ever and ever. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but it's not true. Just think about problems you had in the past. Even the biggest problems you had, they weren't there forever. They changed and they went away. So this one will too. So that can help your mind be more at ease enduring the problem than if you think of it as permanent. The last point says, start training with small problems and gradually develop the ability to practice with bigger ones. So start with little problems like a mosquito buzzing around you, or a small pain or ache or sickness, something not huge, and train in this practice with these relatively small problems. And then you get used to doing it, you get familiar with doing it. Then gradually you can take on bigger ones and eventually even huge problems that come along, because you've already had this practice of doing it. Then even when the huge problems come along, you'll remember, oh yeah, there's this practice of accepting suffering. Let me try that. Yeah. Okay, the next slide is the third and last type of patience. And this is called the patience, or here it's in the book, The Easy Path. It's called the forbearance required to sustain Dharma practice. Because the term for patience, it's actually Zopa, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche's name. Zopa is the Tibetan term for patience. And yeah, it can have other meanings, like forbearance, fortitude, tolerance. So sometimes a little tricky translating that term. So here it's probably better to call it forbearance. The forbearance required to sustain Dharma practice. So the meaning of this is it's not easy to practice Dharma. Dharma is not like a walk in the park. It's actually hard work. If you really want to attain the goals taught by the Buddha, nirvana, freedom from suffering, and then full enlightenment, Buddhahood, that's a big job and not easy and not quick. So we need forbearance to be able to continue practicing Dharma. So the explanation here, the first bullet point says, this involves having forbearance to continue learning and practicing the Dharma, even though it can be challenging, and the willingness to face and challenge our own doubts and mistaken views. So one reason that Dharma can be challenging is because some of the teachings, some of the ideas taught by the Buddha are not easy to accept. Many people have difficulty with karma. They have difficulty accepting karma. More people probably have difficulty accepting reincarnation, rebirth. that we've had past lives before, and we will have more lives after this one, that this life isn't the only one. We have many lives. So for many people, that's very, very difficult, very challenging, but it's an essential part of Buddhist teachings. You can't really fully engage with the Buddhist teachings and practices without accepting reincarnation. You can't just push that aside and say, oh, I don't need that. So it is something we need to, but again, the Buddha said, don't just blindly believe things just because they're in the teachings, but we do need to investigate, to check. And so if we do come across things in the Buddhist teachings that are challenging, that are difficult, we need to put energy into those and study them, learn more about them, explore our own doubts, like, why do I have difficulty accepting this? What are my reasons for not wanting to accept this or not being able to accept this? So challenging our own doubts and mistaken views that we may have. So that's why Dharma can be challenging. And the teachings mention 8 types of objects for which we need this forbearance. They're in the book, but I just mentioned a few here. The qualities of the 3 jewels. I mean, there's a kind of easy way to look at the qualities of the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but there's also very lengthy, extensive lists of all the different qualities of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and some of them are quite difficult to understand and maybe difficult to accept as well. So that's something that can be challenging. The second one is selflessness of persons and phenomena. So the fact that persons like ourselves and others and phenomena, all the things that exist, that these are actually empty of inherent existence, independent, objective existence. So that's a very difficult one to understand and eventually realize. Impermanence, gross impermanence isn't so difficult. It's obvious, we can see it with our eyes, but subtle impermanence is, that's the changing nature of things, that things are changing every minute, every second. They don't stay the same one moment to the next, it's always changing. And then suffering, sometimes people have difficulty with that. Gross suffering isn't difficult to accept, but the suffering of change, meaning the pleasures we experience, the good things in life, that these are actually not real happiness, but are another form of suffering or unsatisfactoriness. They're unsatisfactory. So that's quite challenging to understand and to accept. So those are just some examples of some of the topics in the Dharma that are challenging. So we need the energy, the forbearance to keep going and looking at these topics, not denying them, ignoring them, hoping they'll go away. But yeah, keep exploring them. But that also needs to be done in a healthy way, not like beating our head against the wall, trying to understand something or accept something. But sometimes, it's helpful to just put something aside, put it on the shelf. One person told me that they had a too hard basket that they would put things in that they found too hard. So they just put it in the too hard basket and take it out again later and look at it. Oh, right now, this is too hard for me, but I'll deal with it later. So we need to have a kind of balanced approach to these difficult topics, not completely ignoring them and denying them, but also not pushing ourselves, trying to understand them. Okay, so let's move on to the next of the perfections. Joyous effort. So this actually kind of connects to the previous kind of patience. So joyous effort is a virtuous mental factor that takes delight in virtue. So we have within our mind different mental factors, some of which are virtuous, like faith, compassion, non-harmfulness, non-attachment, and so on. And so one of those, there's 11 virtuous mental factors, and one of those is joyous effort. And so what joyous effort is this aspect of the mind, this experience in the mind that feels happy about doing what is virtuous, doing virtuous actions, such as practicing the Dharma, accumulating merit, and so forth. Yeah, so having joyous effort would certainly help us with the last thing we were just talking about of, the patience or the forbearance with regard to the Dharma. And the opposite of joyous effort is laziness. And so one way we can increase joyous effort is by comparing joyous effort and laziness, and try to see that joyous effort it has lots of advantages, and laziness has disadvantages. So I'll just mention some of the advantages of joyous effort. So it enables us to accomplish things, like just in ordinary activities in life, like studying, writing a book, starting a business, getting a job done. If you have joyous effort, you'll be able to get the work done, accomplish what you set out to do quickly and easily. So it's the same with Dharma. If we have joyous effort, then the work we need to do in the course of Dharma, learning Dharma, practicing Dharma, attaining realizations, and so on, these will occur. These will come about with joyous effort. On the other hand, laziness is the opposite. And there's actually different kinds of laziness. Quite interesting. So one kind of laziness is procrastination. And that means putting things off. Does that sound familiar? So we might have the intention to do a retreat or do a particular study or a particular Dharma practice. But then we keep finding excuses not to do it. Today I'm too busy, I'll do it tomorrow. Or, this year I'm too busy, I'll do it next year. And so we put things off to the future, and we may never get around to doing it. So that's the meaning of procrastination. So an antidote to that is meditation on impermanence and death. And just realize we don't have all the time in the world. Our time is running out. We're getting closer and closer to the end of our life. And if we keep putting things off, then we might die before we get around to doing them. So we need to look carefully at what is important and make sure we do what's important, what needs to be done before we die. The second kind of laziness is being attached to negative activities. So some people have a lot of effort, a lot of enthusiasm to do things that are actually non-virtuous. Going hunting, going fishing, gambling, drug dealing, and so on. And so those are clearly non-virtuous things. But there's also a lot of things that we do that may not be so non-virtuous, but they're not particularly useful. And we can spend a lot of time doing them and also have a lot of attachment to them. So even things like watching movies or going skiing or hanging out with our friends and talking for hours and hours and hours. So if we're doing those things with attachment and mindlessness, then it can actually increase our suffering and our delusions. And, and then again, time is wasted and we're not getting much closer to enlightenment. So this is the second kind of laziness, having attachment to these kinds of activities that are either non-virtuous or not meaningful, not helpful for our long-term goals of liberation and enlightenment. So to counteract this, we can again remember impermanence and death. Our time is running out. And also karma, what kind of karma am I creating by doing these actions? And what will be the result of that karma in the future? And that can help us to lessen our attachment to those activities. And the third type of laziness is discouragement. So this involves, for example, Dharma is so difficult to understand. I can't do it. Meditation is so hard. I can't do it. Enlightenment is so difficult. It will take such a long time. I can't do it. So those kinds of thoughts. So it's understandable. It is difficult to practice Dharma and attain enlightenment, but we shouldn't let our mind get caught up in that kind of thinking. We can do it. And so antidotes to this discouragement are, to think that everybody has Buddha nature, even insects, animals and insects, they have Buddha nature too. They will become enlightened one day. But compared to them, we are in a much better situation because we have a human body, human life, human intelligence. We have the chance to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma. So we are in a much better situation for progressing on the path and attaining enlightenment than a lot of other beings. So thinking I can't do it isn't helpful at all. We can do it. Shakyamuni Buddha was once an ordinary being like ourselves, and he managed to do it. He got himself out of samsara and got to enlightenment. So we can do it too. And it's just a question of practicing the Dharma. So laziness, if we fall into one of these or more of these different kinds of laziness, then we can get stuck and not go anywhere, just like a car stuck in the mud. And you're revving the motor and the wheels are turning, but you're not going anywhere. So we need to get ourselves out of that situation of these kinds of laziness and increase our joyous effort. So it mentions 4 powers that increase our joyous effort. First one is the power of conviction. So this means being convinced that there are good results from engaging in the practice of Dharma. And we can just look at our own experiences. If we have learned Dharma and practiced Dharma even for a short time, we can probably notice some improvement, some positive results, from learning the Dharma. So then we can think, if I keep learning more and practicing more, then there will be more good results, more positive results. It's not a waste of time. Number 2 is the power of firmness, which is self-confidence, confidence in ourself, feeling I can do it. I can learn meditation. I can practice Dharma. I can improve. I can eventually reach enlightenment. And third is the power of joy. And that is when we do virtuous actions, we feel happy about it. We don't do it with, I have to do it because my teacher told me to, or my teacher will be angry at me if I don't do it. And then, it feels like a burden. So that's not helpful. We should feel joyful. And that comes from understanding that what we are doing is good. It's a good thing to do meditation, to do study. We're creating virtue. We're getting closer to enlightenment, and feel joyful about that. Rejoice in what we are doing so that we encourage ourselves to keep going, keep doing more. And fourth is the power of elimination. So the book, The Easy Path, explains the meaning of this as eliminating the tendency to do things partially. So don't just do things halfway and then leave them undone, unfinished, but develop the habit of finishing what you start. Yeah, finish one thing before you start something else. I mean, sometimes we may have to put something aside to do something else, but the point is, yeah, develop this habit of completing things that we do. But other books, other commentaries to this topic explain this fourth one differently. And some call it the power of rest. And the meaning there is, as a bodhisattva, we do have to, on the bodhisattva path, we do have to do a lot of work. We have to put in a lot of effort, but we do sometimes need to take a break. If we just keep pushing ourselves all the time, 24 hours a day, we might burn out, collapse. And so we need to gauge our level of energy and our abilities, and sometimes take a break, relax, go for a walk, because continuously pushing ourselves isn't helpful. So that's another explanation of that fourth power. So now we have different types of joyous effort on the next slide, and different texts explain different, have different lists of joyous effort. So I'll just go through this quickly. There's 5 here. First one is called armor-like joyous effort. This is having the resolve to endure whatever challenges occur when doing a virtuous action. So sometimes there may be difficulties, physical difficulties, for example, doing prostrations, doing the prostration mudra, 100,000 prostrations. So you might get sore knees and sore muscles and a bump on your forehead from doing lots of prostrations. So you need to have this resolve. I will not give up. I will keep doing those prostrations until I finish the 100,000. I mean, you can still do it in a balanced way, a few hundred a day, but not to give up, and be willing to put up with whatever difficulties you encounter along the way. Number 2, joyous effort of application. So this is joyfulness while doing virtuous action. So the first one is more about before we begin doing something virtuous, we need to have this determination. I will go through, I'll put up with whatever difficulties there are in order to do this. The second one is more while we are doing the virtuous action. We need to keep up this joyful energy, remind ourselves of what I'm doing is good. I'm doing a good thing, so feel happy about that. And the third is called the joyous effort of fearlessness. And this is being courageous while doing virtuous action. So sometimes there may be anxiety or apprehension or different kinds of difficulties that arise. So having the courage to go through those difficulties and not lose heart. I like that expression, not lose our heart, but have this courage to keep going. Number 4 is irreversible joyous effort. So this ensures that no obstacles will shake your initial resolve so that you can complete your action. So you decide to do something and you keep going without getting, losing heart, disheartened, and then giving up, turning back. And number 5, joyous effort of not being content. So this means like we might achieve something. Maybe you do finish your 100,000 prostrations, and it's good to rejoice in that and feel good about the fact that you finished 100,000 prostrations. But then I heard one Lama say, you don't stop doing prostrations after you've done your 100,000. You keep doing them. Yeah. So we shouldn't say, okay, I've done enough. I don't have to do that one anymore. But have this resolve to keep doing virtuous actions, purifying negativities, studying, practicing, and so on. Keep going higher and higher in our practice. Okay, so the next slide, the last 2 of the perfections are concentration and wisdom. And at this point in the text, they're just mentioned briefly, but then there's a whole chapter for each of these that comes a little bit later. So yeah, here's the brief explanation. So for concentration, it says that a bodhisattva needs to cultivate single-pointed concentration. And the way of doing that is by the practice of calm abiding, developing calm abiding, which is a very focused, calm state of mind. And then on top of that, a bodhisattva also needs to master various types of concentrations. So they're just briefly mentioned in the book, but the details are found elsewhere. But anyway, but the point is, bodhisattva has to develop good concentration and then engage in other kinds of practices to develop different kinds of concentrations. And then second bullet point is about wisdom. A bodhisattva also needs to train in various kinds of wisdom. And wisdom has two aspects. There's conventional wisdom, like the 5 sciences. This is a sort of a traditional Indian list of more secular knowledge, like medicine and logic and grammar, but it does include philosophy. So bodhisattva does need to train in those areas of knowledge. And nowadays in contemporary world, it's very helpful to know science, Western science, like, His Holiness has brought science into the curriculum in the great monasteries. So the monks in the big monasteries are studying physics and biology and so on, because to teach Dharma in this day and age, you're going to be encountering the sciences. And so it's important to know something about them to teach Dharma, in the modern world. So bodhisattva needs to, learn and train in these different conventional bodies of knowledge. And then ultimate wisdom refers to emptiness, the emptiness of inherent existence. So lots of different kinds of wisdom. And so this course, somehow we've come to the end faster than I expected. So we only have one more talk. And so we don't have time to go into depth with these last 2 perfections. But it just so happens that Thubten Ling has asked me to teach a course on wisdom. It's actually the Discovering Buddhism module on wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness. And that will start next Wednesday. It'll be morning from 10 to 12 Mountain Time. You can find out more on the Thubten Ling website. And so that will run for 5 weeks. And so if you do want to learn more about wisdom, and you have the time, you could attend that class. Then I'll have more time to talk about the wisdom of emptiness. Also, earlier this year, I gave a series of 10 talks on the subject of wisdom for Root Institute in Bodhgaya. And so, those are available on YouTube. I think you have to go to their website to find out information, but there's also more information about wisdom there. But there's still one more topic to look at today quickly. This is, part of the Bodhisattva deeds. It's called the 4 Ways of Gathering Disciples. So the 6 perfections that we just quickly went through, these are practices for a bodhisattva to ripen his or her own mind, to develop their own mind. Then there are these 4 practices which are to ripen the minds of others. So a bodhisattva at some point will start teaching the Dharma, because their goal is to help all sentient beings get out of samsara and reach enlightenment. And that means sentient beings need to learn the Dharma. And so a bodhisattva wants to teach them the Dharma. And so when you get to that point of, becoming a teacher, I mean, you need to study yourself first so that you know what to teach and how to help people. But anyway, at some point, the Bodhisattva will do this. So these are 4 things they need to do. The first one is giving what is necessary. So in like Tibetan monasteries, the monks and nuns usually enter when they're still young, they're children. And so their teacher will provide their needs, their food, clothes, and so on, so that they can stay, survive, and not have to go out and work or beg or whatever. So this is one thing a teacher will do, is giving to the disciples. And another aspect of this is giving gifts, because people like receiving gifts. And so teachers, you probably had this experience if you've met teachers, they'll sometimes give you even, a chocolate bar or a cup of tea or whatever. And so when you receive a gift from a teacher, you feel, wow, this is really nice. And then your mind is more open to that teacher, and then you're more open to listening to what the teacher has to say. So that's why giving is helpful. Number 2 is speaking pleasantly, giving teachings to subdue and guide one's followers. So this is the most important thing, is not just giving cups of tea and chocolate bars, but giving the Dharma. And so you need to teach Dharma to people in a pleasant way, that they will be happy to listen to you, and also giving it in a very clear way according to their level of mind, so that they understand. And so that's the most important thing, is teaching the Dharma. And then number 3 is showing them how to practice the meaning of the teaching. So you don't want to just give intellectual information, but you want to teach them how to practice, how to meditate, how to apply the teachings to their lives, to their minds, and so on. And then the 4th one is practicing in accordance with what one teaches. Walk your talk. So you need to be a good example. If you tell your students to do one thing and then you do the opposite, that's not going to be very effective. So that's a very important aspect of being a teacher, is practicing what you teach. So those are just quickly going through those 4. And so we have 1 week left, 1 more class. And if you can go to the next slide, if you could read chapters 10 and 11, it's quite a few pages, but just do your best. And what I'll do is I haven't fully decided yet, but I'll probably just talk a little bit about both of the last 2 perfections, the perfection of concentration and the perfection of wisdom. And then that will be the end of this course. I'm really sorry I didn't have time to go into things in more detail. But like I say, you can attend that other course on wisdom to find out more about that. And then for the meditation for next week, if you could meditate on the exceptional attitude. So that was from the 7-point cause and effect method for developing bodhicitta. So it's good to review the first 5 points, starting with, all beings as mother. Just review those and then go up to the exceptional attitude, which arises from those contemplations, and you feel you want to take on the responsibility of helping all beings be free of suffering and helping them have happiness. So you may not be at that point of being able to feel that way, but just try to understand. This is what a bodhisattva does. A bodhisattva contemplates these points and does get to that point where they do want to take on that responsibility. And that's the meaning of the exceptional attitude. So just get more familiar with that. And then if you do have time, you could also contemplate what we've looked at today, especially the perfection of patience, and see if you can bring that into your life, be more patient in your life. Okay, so we'll stop there and dedicate the merit, the positive energy of what we have done today. Having a positive motivation and altruistic motivation for participating in the class, and then listening, learning, having positive thoughts in our mind. So we definitely created some merit. Now we dedicate this merit that it will be the cause for peace and happiness for all living beings up to the state of enlightenment. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers, honoring the three sublime ones, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Okay, thank you. I hope that wasn't too rushed going through all that material.
Thank you so much, Venerable Sangye Khadro.